When you walk into a grocery store, every single item has a price tag.
Right.
It is visible, printed, just right there in black and white.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you want that gallon of milk, it costs exactly $3. But what if I told you there is an invisible price tag attached to almost everything in your life?
It is a pretty wild thought, honestly.
Right. It is a number you rarely see on a receipt, but it quietly dictates the rise and fall of entire civilizations.
I mean, it is arguably the single most powerful, yet easily the most misunderstood number in the entire world economy.
We are talking about the price of time itself, also known as the interest rate.
Yes.
Welcome to the room. We are so glad you are here with us. Today's mission for this deep dive is to explore this seemingly boring, dry financial metric.
Because it is anything but boring.
Exactly. We're going to reveal how it actually sparks wild speculative frenzies, crashes economies, and, fundamentally shapes the money in your wallet.
And we have a fantastic roadmap for this. We are drawing on financial historian Edward Chancellor's book. It is called The Price of Time, The Real Story of Interest.
It really is a sweeping, brilliant look at how humans have valued time over the last 5 millennia.
It is.
But to really set the stage for why this matters to you today, we actually have to travel back to the year 1849.
Right. The French newspaper debate?
Yes, there was this fiery debate playing out in the papers.
Okay.
On one side, you have the anarchist Pierre-Joseph Proudhon. He is the guy famous for declaring property as theft.
A pretty bold statement.
Very. And, true to form, Proudhon believed that interest was also theft. He wanted a national bank that would drop interest rates to absolute zero.
Creating what he called free credit, right?
Exactly. His logic was pretty simple. Eliminate the cost of borrowing, and you just eliminate poverty.
Which, on the surface, sounds incredibly appealing.
Sure does.
But on the other side of this debate was the economist Frédéric Bastiat. And Bastiat fired back at Proudhon, arguing that interest is actually an absolutely natural, legitimate mutual exchange.
Because the lender provides capital, and the borrower pays for the time they use it.
Right. To Bastiat, quoting Benjamin Franklin, time is money.
And Bastiat warned that artificially creating free credit would be an absolute disaster. He argued that if you force interest to zero by government decree, the rich will just borrow for free.
Yeah, while the working class, who don't have collateral, just won't be able to borrow at all.
Exactly. He predicted it would ruin the working class, enrich the wealthy, and push the country to the edge of an abyss.
And, the reason this obscure 1849 debate is so vital for understanding your bank account today is because of what happened after the 2008 global financial crisis.
Right.
The book points out that central banks around the world essentially implemented Proudhon's 0% dream. They pushed interest rates to the absolute floor.
But instead of a utopia, Chancellor notes that we kind of ended up living out Bastiat's nightmare of unintended consequences. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Because to understand how we got to the bizarre modern world of 0% interest rates, we have to go all the way back to the actual invention of interest. And this blew my mind reading the book.
Oh, the timeline.
Yeah. Interest was invented long before coined money even existed.
It is wild. It predates the invention of the wheel in Mesopotamia. We are talking about the ancient Near East, deep in the 3rd millennium BC.
And the proof is hidden right there in the language itself. Across the ancient world, the words for interest all translate to the offspring of livestock.
That linguistic connection is so cool.
Right. In ancient Sumerian, the word for interest is mas, which literally means a kid goat.
Yeah.
In ancient Egyptian, the word ems means to give birth. And in ancient Greek, tokos means a calf.
Which just shows us that early humans didn't view interest as some abstract financial penalty whipped up by a banker.
No, not at all.
It was rooted in the physical, biological world.
Yeah, early interest wasn't a mathematical construct. It was a literal biological phenomenon. Like, if I lend you a herd of cows so you can plow your fields, when you give them back a year later, I expect you to return the original herd.
Plus the calves they gave birth to while you had them.
Exactly. Nature is inherently productive. So I have to ask, is this essentially where the core concept of the time value of money comes from?
It absolutely is. When you lend out seed corn or livestock, you are giving up the natural increase that would have happened if you kept them. You are giving up time.
Right.
But when you abstract that biological multiplication and apply it to a ledger of debt, you discover what Einstein supposedly called the 8th wonder of the world: compound interest.
Compound interest, the magical force that either makes you incredibly rich or completely ruins your life.
Yeah, and in the ancient world, it was almost always the latter.
Because nature has limits, right?
Exactly. Nature's growth has physical limits. Cows only breed so fast, crops need rain. But mathematical compounding has no limits whatsoever.
It just keeps going.
Yes. Chancellor details this incredible artifact, a clay cone from around 2400 BC. It documents a border dispute between two neighboring Sumerian cities, Lagash and Umma.
Okay.
The ruler of Lagash claimed that Umma owed a back payment for occupying some agricultural land, and the original debt had been compounding at 33.3% a year.
Which I think the book said was the standard rate for barley loans in Babylon. But mathematically, if something compounds at 33%, it is doubling every 2.5 years.
Exactly. And over the decades, this compounded debt had grown to 4.5 trillion liters of barley.
Wait, really? Trillion?
Trillion.
With a T.
You literally could not grow enough barley on planet Earth to pay that back.
Which is why it resulted in a massive war. Debts compounding exponentially became such a persistent threat to ancient societies that rulers had to step in just to keep their civilizations from collapsing.
Wow. So they tried to regulate it.
Yeah, Hammurabi's famous code around 1750 BC actually set maximum interest rates in stone. But even with caps, debts would pile up so high that rulers routinely had to declare debt jubilees. Literally wiping the slate clean.
Just forgiving all debts so the peasants wouldn't revolt, yeah.
What is amazing to me is that human nature hasn't changed a bit. Because as soon as Hammurabi sets a legal limit on interest, the ancient bankers immediately start looking for loopholes.
Oh, of course. What's fascinating here is that the concept of regulatory arbitrage, bankers finding clever ways to skirt the rules, it existed even in Babylon.
No way. How did they do it?
Lenders would write contracts for incredibly short terms, turning a legal nominal rate into a massive annualized penalty. Or they would just hide the interest entirely.
Disguising it.
Yeah, disguising it as a late payment fee to evade the king's market police.
Oh my gosh. It is an ancient Mesopotamian overdraft fee.
Pretty much.
So we have this biological basis for interest. But as society shifts away from lending goats and barley, and we start using metallic money, coins that don't literally give birth to calves, the perception of interest completely flips.
It really does.
It sparks this massive moral war over the nature of charging for time.
Because a gold coin doesn't naturally reproduce. Aristotle famously declared that interest was the most unnatural of all modes of making money because, as he put it, money is barren.
Right, you can't plant a silver coin in the dirt and grow a silver tree.
Exactly.
And this Aristotelian view completely dominates the Middle Ages. Usurers, the moneylenders, were absolutely despised.
They were. Theologians argued that a lender who charges interest is literally selling time. And to medieval thinkers, time did not belong to humans. Time belongs solely to God.
So to sell time made you a thief of time.
A thief of time, exactly. But the reality of commerce eventually forces a shift. As we move into the Italian Renaissance, international trade just explodes.
Right.
Merchants in the late 14th century are trading wool across Europe, sending ships to the Levant. And these processes take years.
They aren't quick trips.
No. So to a merchant whose capital is tied up in a ship halfway across the world, time isn't just God's domain anymore. Time is their most precious commercial asset.
And this is where we get the concept of foregone profit.
Yes. The Latin term is lucrum cessans. The church eventually had to concede that if a merchant lends you money, they are giving up the chance to use that capital in their own profitable business venture.
That makes sense.
So therefore, they deserve compensation for that foregone profit. This fundamentally changes interest from being viewed as the sin of greed to being recognized as a legitimate business cost.
I totally get the logic for a business loan. Like, if I'm a Renaissance merchant, I borrow money to buy wool, I sell the wool for a profit, and I split that profit with you by paying interest. It's a win-win.
Right.
But what if I am just a starving peasant?
The consumer loan.
Yeah. If I am borrowing money just to feed my family, I am not generating any new wealth to pay you back. I am just surviving. So how is charging interest on a consumer loan like that anything other than extortion?
That is the exact question that troubled economists for centuries. If the money isn't being used productively, why should it cost money to borrow it?
Exactly.
The answer lies in human psychology, specifically an economic concept known as time preference. To understand how this works mechanically, think of the famous Stanford marshmallow test from the 1960s.
Oh, where they put a marshmallow in front of a preschooler and say, if you don't eat this for 15 minutes, I will give you 2 marshmallows.
Yes, that one. And it turns out humans, not just preschoolers, are naturally impatient.
We want the sugar now.
We do. We value a reward today much higher than a reward tomorrow. Time preference is basically the observation that a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush.
Okay, I am following.
So even if a consumer loan isn't productive, it still bridges a gap in time. The borrower gets to consume today, and the lender has to defer their consumption until tomorrow.
Ah, I see.
Interest on a consumer loan is simply the market price of human impatience. It is the cost of wanting to eat the marshmallow today.
Interest is the market price of human impatience. That makes total sense.
It really does.
So if time preference makes interest an undeniable reality, the next logical question people started asking was, shouldn't the government just force that price to be as low as possible so trade is easy and everyone gets rich?
Which brings us to 1660s England. The country had just been devastated by the Great Plague and the Great Fire of London.
Just a terrible time.
The economy is in absolute ruins, and a prominent, wealthy merchant named Josiah Child steps forward with a magical solution.
Oh, Josiah Child.
Yes. He lobbies Parliament to artificially force the legal interest rate down to 4%. He promises this will instantly revive trade and double the nation's wealth.
I was laughing so hard reading this part of the book.
Why is that?
Because Josiah Child is basically the 17th century equivalent of a corporate raider. I mean, he ended up running the East India Company, which was a massively leveraged, debt-heavy operation.
Oh, totally.
He wasn't some man of the people trying to help the poor recover from the plague. He was a corporate titan lobbying the government to slash his own borrowing costs so he could boost his profit margins.
He was absolutely talking his own book. But his arguments were incredibly seductive. They required a brilliant mind to dismantle them, and that mind belonged to the philosopher John Locke.
Right. Locke stepped in.
Yeah. Locke argued against Child by proposing that there's a natural rate of interest.
A natural rate.
He explained that interest is a price determined organically by the supply of savings and the demand for borrowing. You can't just decree it to be lower.
It is like trying to pass a law saying gravity is now 50% weaker. It doesn't actually change the physics.
Exactly. And Locke warned that if the government artificially forces the interest rate below its natural level, 3 terrible things happen.
Okay, what is the first one?
First, it punishes savers. Locke specifically mentioned widows and orphans who rely on the safe return of their capital to survive. If rates are artificially low, their income just vanishes.
That makes sense. And the second?
Second, if the return on lending is forced too low, regular people will simply hoard their money under the mattress. They will pull it out of the economy, which slows trade and causes deflation.
And the third warning is the most prophetic, honestly. He said it actually enriches expert brokers and elite bankers.
Yes. Because when the government caps the rate, there isn't enough credit to go around. So who gets the cheap loans? Not the small merchant.
Right. The well-connected elites get the cheap money.
And then they can lend it out in the shadows at much higher illegal rates, just pocketing the difference.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Locke is essentially describing the exact criticisms of modern 0% interest policies.
It is uncanny.
Artificially low rates hurt vulnerable savers and massively enrich the financial elite who have the connections to access cheap leverage.
Locke definitely won that intellectual argument in England. But, theory is one thing. What happens when someone actually gets the keys to the kingdom and tries to force rates to 0 in real life?
Oh, man. This leads to one of the wildest stories in financial history. Enter John Law.
Jessamy John.
Yes, he was known as Jessamy John. A mathematical genius, an absolute degenerate gambler, and a convicted murderer who escaped from a London prison and fled to the continent.
Quite the resume.
Fast forward to 1715. The King of France dies, leaving the country totally bankrupt. The regent is desperate. And John Law walks in and says, I can fix your entire economy, not with taxes, but with an abundance of money.
So Law convinces the regent to let him establish a central bank that issues paper money.
Right.
And he uses this brand new printing press to basically buy up the French national debt. By flooding the bond market with this new paper money, he drives the interest rate all the way down to 2%.
Which sparks the legendary Mississippi bubble. Law creates a massive corporation, the Mississippi Company, which basically monopolizes all French overseas trade.
And since he drove the interest rate on safe bonds down to 2%, holding them became pointless. Nobody wants a 2% return.
Right, so everyone swaps their bonds for shares in the lost company. The stock price goes absolutely parabolic. It went up 20-fold in a year.
People got so unfathomably wealthy that the French literally had to invent a new word for them.
Millionaire.
Millionaire.
Right.
The wealth effect was staggering. It turned Parisian society completely upside down.
There is this crazy detail in the book about how the liveried servants, like the footmen and maids, were making so much money day trading shares in the street that the government actually had to pass a law banning servants from wearing velvet and gold cloth.
Wow.
Yeah, you literally couldn't tell the aristocrats from the help.
But, underneath the velvet, the economic foundation was rotting. And this brings us to one of the most important concepts in the entire book.
Okay.
It is an economic mechanism observed by Richard Cantillon, a banker living in Paris at the time. Cantillon saw exactly what was going wrong with law's system, and it explains so much of our world today.
Break down the Cantillon effect for us, because this feels like the master key to understanding modern finance.
Sure. The Cantillon effect describes how new money enters an economy. When a central bank prints money to buy government debt, that new money doesn't just magically sprinkle down equally on everyone buying groceries.
Right, it doesn't just appear in our pockets.
Exactly. It enters the economy at a specific point. It goes to the investors and bankers who sold the debt. And those investors don't use millions of newly printed francs to buy extra loaves of bread.
What do they buy?
They use it to buy other financial assets, like Mississippi Company shares.
So it is like pouring water into a tiered champagne fountain. The top glass, the financial elite, gets filled up and overflows first, driving asset prices to the moon, while the bottom glasses, the wage earners, stay completely dry.
Precisely. The newly printed money gets trapped in the financial system. It creates a massive asset bubble and the illusion of prosperity while masking the fact that the actual real-world economy isn't growing at all.
That is terrifying.
And Cantillon warned that eventually that newly minted money leaks out into the real economy. And when it does, chasing the same amount of real goods, it sparks massive inflation.
Which is exactly what happened in France.
Yes. The bubble burst, the paper money became worthless, and John Law had to flee the country in disgrace.
The psychological lesson here was perfectly summarized over a century later by the great Victorian financial journalist Walter Bagehot.
Oh, his famous rule.
Yeah, he had a rule. John Bull can stand many things, but he cannot stand 2%. John Bull being the personification of the sensible British public.
Bagehot understood that investors get habituated to a certain rate of return. If you push interest rates down to 2%, people won't just accept being poorer.
They start looking elsewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
They'll desperately reach for yield by taking on insane risks they would normally never touch.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Reading about what sensible people actually do when they lose their minds chasing yield.
The examples are great.
Bagehot listed the absurd things people threw their money at during these easy money periods in the 19th century. They invested in a canal to Kamchatka in the remote Russian Far East.
Wow.
They invested in a company with a plan to animate the Dead Sea. And my personal favorite, British investors, actually funded a massive shipment of ice skates to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil.
Ice skates.
Ice skates to the tropics. Just desperate, blind yield chasing because safe money paid absolutely nothing.
I mean, it sounds comedic, but this dynamic is incredibly dangerous. And it wasn't just a quirk of the 18th or 19th centuries.
No.
Because if driving rates to 2% predictably causes people to lose their minds and sparks massive bubbles, why did the most educated central bankers of the 20th century decide to do exactly that right before the Great Depression?
Which takes us to July 1927, the North Shore of Long Island, New York. There is a highly secretive meeting of the world's top central bankers.
Heavy hitter.
You have Benjamin Strong, the head of the U.S. Federal Reserve, alongside the heads of the British and German central banks.
Right.
And Britain is in a terrible depression because they tied their currency to gold at the wrong price.
Right.
So they beg Benjamin Strong to lower U.S. interest rates to basically take the pressure off the British pound.
And Strong agrees. He lowers the Fed discount rate and starts buying government securities. He famously told a colleague he was doing it to give the U.S. stock market a petit coup de whiskey. A little shot of whiskey.
A little shot of whiskey that led to a historic blackout.
Definitely.
But what I didn't understand before reading Chancellor's analysis is how the Fed justified cutting rates when the U.S. economy was already booming in the 1920s.
Yeah.
Weren't they worried about inflation?
That is the crucial mechanical flaw that brought the whole system down. The Fed in the 1920s was obsessed with a theory championed by the Swedish economist Knut Wicksell.
Okay, Wicksel's theory.
Wicksell believed that as long as consumer prices were stable, meaning no inflation and no deflation, it meant your interest rate was perfectly aligned with Locke's natural rate.
Okay.
And throughout the 1920s, the U.S. Consumer Price Index was basically flat. So the Fed looked at the dashboard, saw flat prices, and said, no inflation here, it is totally safe to keep money easy.
But they were misreading the dashboard, because the 1920s saw massive technological leaps. Electrification, mass production, Henry Ford's assembly line. Productivity was skyrocketing.
Exactly. In a normal free market, that massive increase in efficiency should have caused consumer prices to fall. Cars and radios should have gotten significantly cheaper.
But they didn't.
No. By pumping enough easy money into the system just to keep prices from falling, the Fed was actually keeping the real interest rate artificially, dangerously low.
It is like driving a car downhill. If you keep your foot perfectly steady on the gas pedal to maintain the exact same RPMs on your dashboard, you're actually accelerating dangerously without realizing it.
That is a great analogy.
They mask the real economic dynamic. And just like the Cantillon effect predicted, that easy money bypassed the grocery store and went straight into financial assets.
People took out massive margin loans to buy stocks.
And the market went absolutely parabolic, and we all know how that ended in October 1929.
Which brings us to Chancellor's ultimate thesis regarding our modern era, specifically the response to the 2008 crisis.
Right. Can you impartially walk us through how the book connects this?
Sure. Chancellor draws a direct structural parallel. The book argues that after 2008, central bankers around the world acted exactly like John Law and Benjamin Strong.
They initiated quantitative easing, which mechanically is just a central bank creating digital money out of thin air to buy massive amounts of government bonds.
Right.
And by creating artificially high demand for those bonds, the price goes up, which mathematically forces the interest rate, the yield, down to almost zero.
Precisely. And the book notes that, just like the Fed in the 1920s, modern central bankers pointed to low consumer inflation in the 2010s to justify these extreme measures.
They said, look, bread and milk aren't getting more expensive, so we can keep printing.
Yeah. But the author argues the Cantillon effect struck again. That money got trapped in the financial system. It didn't inflate consumer goods immediately. It inflated assets, stocks, bonds, real estate.
Which explains so much of the modern economy. It fueled massive wealth inequality because people who already owned assets like houses and stock portfolios saw their net worth explode, while wage earners couldn't afford to buy in.
And Chancellor adds that it also created zombie companies.
Zombie companies.
Businesses that don't actually make enough profit to survive in a normal market, but they stay alive only because they can roll over their debt at nearly 0%.
Wow. So Chancellor basically concludes that John Locke was right all along. Artificially forcing rates below their natural level punishes savers, enriches the financial elite who get the cheap leverage first, and distorts the entire economy until the bubble inevitably bursts.
That is the core takeaway of his analysis, yes.
We have covered so much ground today. From the ancient Babylonian barley loans that proved interest is rooted in the biological reality of time, to the moral debates of the Middle Ages.
We saw John Law create paper millionaires out of thin air.
Yeah, we learned how the Cantillon effect traps money in the financial elite's champagne glass. And we watched Victorian investors try to sell ice skates in Rio just to chase a little bit of yield.
A lot of history repeats itself.
And we've seen how central banks, from the roaring 20s to the post-2008 world, keep falling into the same trap of using easy money to paper over deeper structural issues. So what does this all mean for you?
Well, it means that time has a price.
Exactly. And whenever a government or a central bank tries to make money artificially cheap, they aren't actually eliminating that price. They are just hiding it. And the true cost is always paid by society down the line, whether it is through hidden inflation, massive wealth inequality, or the bursting of an epic, history-altering bubble.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought inspired by Chancellor's research.
For it.
We know that demographic shifts, like aging populations, naturally tend to lower a society's interest rates because older people save more and consume less.
Right.
But we also learned today that interest is the ultimate measure of our impatience, our time preference, the cost of wanting the marshmallow today.
Marshmallow test, yeah.
So as we move deeper into a digital age, an age of algorithms, endless scrolling, and instant delivery that constantly rewires our brains for instant gratification, are we destined to become a society that values the future less and less?
That is a chilling thought.
And if our collective impatience continues to rise, but our economic models keep trying to push interest rates to zero, what will be the ultimate price of our time?
Next time you're at the grocery store looking at the price of a gallon of milk, remember the invisible price tag. It might just be the most important number in your life. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.